with me and Snicket and our special guest for today, Charles, we're all gonna be talking about balancing encounters for Dungeons and Dragons and I guess other different RPGs. Anything where, I guess more specifically D&D, because I think that's what we all have most experience with. I think some of the things that we talk about can kind of translate to other things as well. I'm gonna really quickly post out a link, but yeah, I think I guess for Snicket, I would ask you first, like, when you're going about and balancing encounters and figuring out what your players are going to face, what are some of the questions that you ask yourself to, I don't know, I guess, come up with the encounter itself?
God, that's difficult. It depends, because running 3 campaigns, I have 3 completely different parties with different strengths and running different storylines, so usually I ask, well, what makes the most sense to run here, and then I go from there. Or sometimes I'll be a little shit and go, this would be really fun to throw at them, and that's what I do. I don't know how it is for Charles.
For balancing, or just like or developing encounters for my parties and stuff like that?
I think just like coming up with the idea, right, of like what... I guess it kind of depends. If you're running a campaign, it might just flow out naturally. But like when you're designing a campaign, an encounter, what kind of questions do you ask yourself, or what do you do to like come up with the initial plan of it?
Generally, it's it'll be set up kind of almost in the week advance, because whatever my party does that week, I'm like, okay, so they're going to be blah 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 said here, and the encounters are kind of like what location they're in, so what makes sense to fight. Really, I've never really worried about CR levels, because I think it's a little wonky to try to like judge anything, because at the end of the day, it's random what's going to happen. You know, a bugbear could wipe a party when you don't mean it to, because dice go bad. And then really just kind of making sure that it's not just an HP slog.
Yeah,
that is a big thing, is making sure that you're not putting hit point meat bags up and going, have fun hitting at this for the next 3 hours. But I actually do pay attention to CR, mostly because there comes to a point where I'm like, I use it, I don't necessarily have as a hard line, but I use it as a good guideline for, man, I really want to use this, how badly would it thrash the party in a more technical terms? And if I'm going, well, that is like 20,000 XP over deadly, then I might not want to use it. But I guess that leads into another big point of encounter balancing, if Chris does not mind if I change the subject.
No, go ahead.
Is it's always easier to start strong, and then for me at least, to start strong and then tinker with mid-battle, rather than have something that's too weak and then go, well, fuck, how do I make this stronger? But that's, again, just me and how I typically run my encounters. Is I prefer to sort of go, whoops, they're not running at peak efficiency anymore, rather than, that didn't do anything to my party. What the fuck am I gonna do now?
Yeah, it's always easier to nerf than it is to buff, because your players don't know that they've got a fire breath that recharges on a 5 to 6. They just see it happen once, and then you stop using it, and you're like, oh, it's not recharging. It's like, no, I'm not rolling to recharge it, because it's going to wipe you if I continue doing it. Or kind of like, oh, well, no, that 400 hit points just dropped to 300. Its AC dropped by 1. You saw nothing behind the DM screen as this thing is thrashing in the party, which, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's fine that it happened. You know, not every encounter should be like a harrowing, like, oh my god, 3 people are down, we're scrambling to get people back up, because those are great to throw out every once in a while, but like, they lose their effect after a time.
Can I just hashtag bless? Thank you, Charles, because that's one of my big things. Is I, as a DM and as a player, am not a fan of life-threatening battles every time you go into encounter. It's like it loses its impact. It's when you do so, it's like saying a word over and over and over again. Eventually you're like, it's completely lost all meaning. Encounters are like that. You want encounters that are sometimes just pure fun to do, and every now and then you want something that sets them back on their heels and has them puckering, because, you know, but you always want a level of challenge in there, because otherwise it's just boring for them and it's boring for you. But yeah, it's like if every battle you have almost everyone going down all the time, it's not. By and large, there are people who enjoy that all the time, but by and large, most of the time your players are just, it's draining to go through all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And like, I think stretching out the encounter so that there is enough of that danger level to keep the party on their toes, but not enough to always be knocking the breath out of them, is like a really hard fine line to find. And I think even it can be hard between different like groups, like different makeups of different parties and different like ways that people play. Like you kind of have to get used to how they play and switch it up accordingly. So like one group might have more tanks in their party, so you have to do more damage or do more things to like make the tanks not as, I guess, damage soaking, or find ways around the tanks so that you can, you know, harry your squishier party members.
Range spells.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think we're just gonna bounce all over the place, I think, today.
Probably.
Is making fights dynamic as well, and part of making fights dynamic is making sure those squishy people who like to hide out in the back line are also harried, which can be difficult to do. Ranged spells are a really good way to do that. Ranged attacks, having enemies that can teleport or otherwise move through ranks a little bit unharried themselves. Because as soon as you start hitting the squishies, the parties tend to go into being more reactive than proactive at that point. Because, oh my god, the wizard's almost dead. Please, someone protect the wizard. I had a moment like that this past Saturday when I was running for Science Crew, and I had an enemy that could teleport and teleported right up to Lyrie, our wizard, and took her down, her max HP down to 7 when they're level like 6 at the moment. All of a sudden the party went, oh shit, and it wasn't a what I would consider balanced towards a deadly thing, but it became a lot more difficult because of rolls of dice, which is another thing. But Charles is really good at making battles dynamic, as Chris and I can attest to.
Well, I mean, it runs back to not making everything a HP slog. It should be, and it's not just to hit the bad guy dies. Because, again, you run that so many times, it gets boring. It always is kind of like, the possibility for failure should always be there. So, but it should be like failing forward. So the party fails to stop blah, but the game's still going on. You still failed forward. And like running the encounter may be to stop a specific ritual, or it may be to, that there's these cool crystals spread across the entire room that if you break them, fun stuff happens.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Or, I mean, there's always the great, like, the chase scenes or all that stuff, which are really kind of... Because they're encounters in themselves. You may not be rolling a lot, you may not be rolling to hit or something like that, but running a really cool chase scene or an escape scene, those are all encounters, and, you got your skill checks and all that stuff like that, and try to make that dynamic and spread those out through the thing, so it's like the players feel invested, and they have, like, that they're deciding their fate with the dice is the big thing.
Player agency is the thing. Yeah. Charles did that this past Tuesday, where we had to run through like a gauntlet and had to make rolls, and that is an encounter because you will blow spells, you can lose HP, you can lose other things like Bardic Inspiration die, so it does wear on your party's resources. So that's another way to make encounters interesting is by having these sorts of things. Also, not just layer actions, but maybe environmental things that can sometimes happen as well. Especially if you're fighting and you have people who swing big with spells or stuff like that that can change like difficult terrain and stuff like that, is sort of that adds and heightens and makes things dynamic. So it's again, it's sort of trying different things and keeping your players interested and engaged, and also getting them all engaged, because it's so easy to get lost with the front line who are doing the most amount of damages, the fighters, the paladins, that sort of thing. And sometimes it's so much, it's like you gotta keep them, and if you try to move, so picking enemies also helps with that too. And again, we are all over the place today.
That's funny, because I was just about to switch over to something else entirely. Steve, you mentioned something farther up in the chat about smaller innocuous fights being a good resource waster. I don't know if you guys already talked about this, but part of an example of that was I just was doing one of the podcasts I was running. It's basically my two best friends from high school, and it's just a 2-person party. And I had them fight, like, I think it was 2 harpies. And then after the 2 harpies, they had to fight like probably 4 drowners. And that almost actually like wiped them out. Like, they almost bit it at the drowners, because I guess I hadn't realized how much the harpy fight had taken them down, not only in health, but also in like how many times the barbarian had raged and how many times the ranger had cast spells. So then when that fight that came around, which were both medium encounters, that second encounter became more of a hard encounter. It's actually kind of made them a little scared, which wasn't my intention, but it did make for a really fun session.
Oh yeah, I mean the running those small innocuous encounters are great. I mean, I've done a bunch of times with the Tuesday group and stuff like that. It's like, well, here's 3 or 4 fights before you get to long rest. So now just start like allocating resources a little better, because I know that's one of those things. Like, a lot of DMs are like, we've got 1 combat per session, and that combat's a big combat. It's like, it takes up 2-3 hours. But then everyone's got this, preconception. We can blow all our spells, all our abilities, and all this stuff, and then be like, oh, then we're gonna take a long rest afterwards, and we can just be fine with it. And that's something you can like run that a little bit differently, so though your players are a little bit more cautious about burning that 7th level spell, because, oh no, this is, we're fighting 1 demon now, but we're behind enemy lines, we've got resources are scarce, and if we rest, there's always that chance of being caught or something, and there's also the timetable idea, that you set the clock to something, and it discourages your players from resting, because they know they're on the clock.
Yeah, again, Charles is really damn good at this, because he's been doing the things he said in his game on Tuesday that Chris and I are both in, is we had a time limit, and literally a lot of us were down to like very little HP, and we didn't even want to risk a short rest because time, and we were afraid of losing time. So, and that's, again, Charles makes a really good point. It's and so does Stevie, is just, you have, if you do small fights and sort of you get your players to like start thinking about resources, like Charles has me thinking about, well, I could blow this, but I might need this later. I'm just going to use my cantrips at the moment, or I'm going to use my rapier at the moment. Is keeping your players up on their toes, where a long rest isn't guaranteed, adds a sort of element of danger to the fight without having to do a big slog of a battle where, it's everyone's screaming and everything's on fire and it's the end of the world.
And kind of running the line of like the encounter planning and stuff like that is like, I know that in our hearts of hearts we all love the one gigantic bad guy that can take on all 6 of your party members and hold his own. That conception's slightly flawed in this, at least in 5th edition, because of action economy. Because the way they built this is if your bad guys are swinging less than your party, they're going to go down really fast, or it's vice versa.
Exactly. Turn economy was one of the first things that Charles taught me when I was Babby DMing for the first time. Because I had a penchant for, I want the big bad things to come in and that's going to be lots of fun, but they weren't doing enough. They weren't presenting enough of a challenge. Yeah, they hit, but they wouldn't hit often. And so the majority of the party would be completely fine. So sometimes quantity over quality can also be a good thing. It gets easier to do quantity and quality the higher level they get because but at lower levels, you know, you can have like this one big bad, but you can also have like 5 to 10 smaller bads, and all of a sudden they're scrambling because this is death by 1,000 needles.
And in most combats, you can start to see like where like when you set the tone for the combat, when you knock the fighter down to half life in 2 swings, and everyone's like, "Oh God, I'm gonna stay away from this thing," and there's that awesome like a "oh shit" moment, which is like every DM loves that moment. You see your players start like running through their sheets to see what they've got, what abilities can I use on this and stuff like that. That's a great feeling because they're invested in there, all that stuff. But there's also that turning point on the backside of combat when it just becomes cleanup. And everyone's just like, no, and there's like, we're just gonna roll dice. This thing's pretty much dead. It's very, you know, we're like 1 turn away from ending it because either the ads are done. This thing's, you know, just it's burned all its legendary actions for a turn, or it's burned all its legendary resistances and all that stuff. And it just kind of runs that line, and it's kind of like it's almost. I hate to say it's almost worth hand waving some fights like that where you hit that point where it's like, well, it's clean up now, and legitimately you guys are gonna roll, you know, 2 or 3 dice, and then we're gonna waste 45 minutes cleaning up.
Agreed.
It's like the big bad's down, but there's still 3 ghouls running around that have like got, you know, 80 hit points. You guys, you focus the boss. Now these 3 things are running around. You can just hand wave that.
Yeah, at a certain point, it's keeping things interesting and also time economy for you and your players. Is that 45 minutes, they could be like the perfunctory, we're cleaning up the minions. You could be doing other things. So it's all about knowing your players, knowing what they can do, and getting a good feel for how the flow of battle's going. Because sometimes, because I have some really big heavy hitters in some of my games that do lots of damage. So sometimes I'll add extra HP, but because of the way the dice rolls are going, that amount of damage is not being done. I'm not going to sit there for another 2-3 hours while they whittle away that extra 100 HP that I tacked on, so it disappears. Because that's perfunctory at that point.
Oh yeah, bags of hit points are not fun. The bags of hit points stop being fun at like level 5. I think that running the same line, like, I mean, as much as like the idea of like balancing encounters like that, I'm like, do you guys fudge dice rolls?
Yes, I definitely do.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit I have fudged dice rolls on occasion.
I've done it in both ways, though. I've done it against myself, and I've done it for the encounter. Whatever way makes the encounter more dramatic and more fun. I never do it in a way to like fuck over the party members or make it so that they can't win or anything like that. But definitely, like, if like sometimes I'll even fudge like AC if they're like just not hitting something. I'll just be like, screw it, I'll just lower its AC by like 1 or 2 and let them get some licks in. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think as long as you're keeping in mind your players and their ability to have fun and also make the encounter hard or maybe not even hard, but challenging and exciting.
I don't know. I'm one of those types of, if my players are having fun, I don't give a shit. That's the important thing. Is they're having fun? I'm having fun. Cool. The rules can go out the window. But yeah, I've fudged things. I've mostly fudged things in a way where I'm like, story-wise, this player should get the kill. And it's like they're 1 turn away and someone technically gets the killing blow and it's not that character. I might tack on, I'm like, oh shit, they're hanging on by a thread. Because narratively speaking, it's more interesting. But then again, you know, I am notorious for loving the storytelling aspect. So if it makes things dramatic and fun and epic, and my players feel like big damn heroes, like David taking on Goliath, then I'm here for fudging a couple things. I'm more sometimes in the middle of battle realize that some of the homebrew aspects of some of the homebrew stuff I make might be a little much. So I'll typically go, oh, suddenly it's dropped off a couple dice because I was not expecting to hit that hard. So, yeah. I believe Angel's Sin asked, how do you feel about infinite spawners until the party meets a certain condition?
I dig it. I think it's a cool, like, dynamic, like, feel to something. It's like, okay, so this thing is gonna, every time you kill this thing, it gets back up, or the room just continues to fill with stuff until you, like, you finish the code, you solve the puzzle. But
like a series, like every like round, like a couple more goblins show up or something small that kind of can harry your party but not take them out altogether.
Oh, yeah, it's not like, oh, well, every round 1d6 beholders show up, like,
Oh God!
I mean, because that one's a really cool, like, idea, because it kind of does make the fight not about the killing. It's about solving the puzzle. It's about solving the the riddle or all that stuff. I mean,
yeah, it becomes a point of pressure. It adds tension. It adds a sense of urgency, because if it's infinite spawning, now if your players, because with puzzles in D&D, it's very one of those things where your players can get in half a second, it's no big deal, or your players can just not get it. And if you're tying an infinite spawn until conditions met, and they're not getting it, and it looks like they're going to die in an infinitely spawning room of skeletons, you might want to start taming it, because that's, I don't know, to me that's not fun, of watching your players get more and more frustrated as you're trying to figure out this puzzle, especially for some, if you're doing like a meta puzzle. Like, don't do meta puzzles where you have to have outside knowledge in order to solve it in game. But you want it to be fun. So to me, if I'm going to do infinitely spawning tied to a condition, make the condition something that's relatively achievable, instead of watching for like an hour as your players are tearing out their hair trying to figure out the esoteric puzzle you set up, and
as goblins are tearing out their hair. Yeah,
as goblins are tearing out their hair and chunks of flesh and all that lovely stuff.
Okay, I have an interesting question, I think, for you guys. I had a recent encounter, same podcast with my two friends, where they boarded a pirate ship all stealthily, and basically came at it in two separate ways. And the barbarian went to the mid-deck where all the cannons were and had this bright idea of taking the cannons out from the chains and basically making them so that they're not attached to anything, so that if they were to fire, they were to rock and push back from the recoil. And so what his plan was to take out as many as he could, and then fired one so that it launched across the boat to the other side and like hit the side, and then made all of the other cannons fall the other side, tipping the boat, which then like I made so all the enemies stumbled and kind of like lost their footing. Some of them got crushed by cannons, and it took this like really hard like 10 pirates plus a gunslinger fight into like still interesting encounter, but like definitely made it a lot less difficult than I was intending it to be. What do you do in circumstances like that where your players come up with an interesting thing that you didn't think about to retain the integrity of the fight, but also let them have their moment?
Reward them thinking outside the box, flat out. That's exactly the thinking you want in a D&D. Any player, you want them to be engaged enough to be like, and as long as they're not like, like they're not abusing or breaking rules at that point. Like, yeah, physically, yeah, you do this, and this. And I'm like, okay, sure. And then, you set a difficulty check for like the thing, or, but you should reward them. There should be some physical thing they're getting out of this. So like, if they did that, like, oh yeah, so the for a round you knocked half the crew prone for that, so you guys can clean up a little bit, or you knocked a couple guys overboard.
That's exactly what happened.
And I think that I think you guys have done this to me a couple times, where it's been like, Jesus, like, you guys have thought outside the box, and they made like the this week exactly where you guys fought the Archwraith. Like, coming up with all those little things, like, okay, so like, free his soul, treat the dead with respect and stuff like that. That was a very big step, and like, okay, so there was roles involved, but I rewarded the players. At the end of the day, it's all about, if they think outside the box, give it to them. I mean, it should always be yes, unless it has to be no.
I am...
Oh my god, that's an amazing quote.
Yeah, I am with Charles on this. Always reward your players for creativity. I know a lot of times as DMs, it's like, God damn it, or, especially if it's something where it thwarts some of the plans you have, especially for encounters. Dude, just... To me, having them think outside the box in that way shows they are interested and they are invested in your game. And you want to reward that, because this is what you want as a DM. You want your players invested in the game. You want them to be into it to that point where they're thinking that wildly outside the box. If they're going to go, hold on, I got a dumb idea, do it. Because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be fucking amazing, and it's going to be something they're going to talk about for a while.
I'm going to say, if a player ever prefaces an idea, I've got an insane idea, I've got a dumb idea, this isn't going to work, but let's try this. You make every step you can to make sure that it's plausible for it to work. Because if you think the idea is super cool, like, well, I'm going to, like, with, for combat ideas, I'm trying to think of, some of you guys that were stupid. Like, Christina climbing the Minotaur.
Yes!
Dragon's Dogma on that shit.
Yeah, that is a ridiculous idea, but it's fucking cool.
That was fucking ridiculous. Yeah. I think my favorite, kind of my players thinking outside the box, and I said, let's do this, was my Wednesday game. The Fallen Returns, which people have been watching, holy shit, hi guys, was Charles and Dustin, with Dustin playing the professor as the evocation school wizard, and Connor was a brawler at this point with fists, and because an evocation wizard can kind of sculpt spells, they came up with this idea that the professor would cast lightning bolt and then would twist it and shape it so it would go around Connor's fists, and so Connor could punch with the lightning bolt. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know how to begin to make this work, but this is cool, so we're just gonna make some rolls. And to be honest, again, this is still one of the things I always talk about, and I had no part in it other than saying yes.
Hadouken!
I just had, like, Dustin roll, what was it, Arcana or a spell check, and I think
it was just... Yeah, it was just like, use your spell modifier to see if we can make this work. And I'm like, this is such a stupid idea, but it's awesome.
It was awesome, and one of my favorite things. And Christina has a question. Hi, Christina. I love you.
Hey, Christina. It's your fault.
Dungeon crawls can be a slog. How do you make combat interesting in that? Sparse combat with more puzzle traps or more monster stuff?
I think for me, it's a mixture of both. I tend to, whenever I'm doing a dungeon crawl, which I've only done a few of them, it tends to be like whatever I think makes the most sense for it to be there, and I will generally do like a few enemies in one area, and then maybe heavier, more like intense kind of single character that might, like, if the fight takes too long or if the fight's too loud, that might alert them. So after they're done fighting these like smaller nobodies, that this big hulking son of a bitch will come in and start kind of tearing into their asses. And then I generally will also, I love to throw in traps. I usually do trapped hallways, like a thing where you can't really progress unless you either figure out how to disarm the trap or just fucking make a mad dash to try and get through it as fast as you can. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but yeah, that's what I tend to do.
I tend to lean on the diversity end of it. Kind of running like, so if you've got 6 rooms in a dungeon, that room should not be filled with just goblins and were-rats, and just running that line every single time. Because I've done a few like old school dungeon crawls. It's been like, and it's one of those things like you can bump up old school monsters to make this feel great, like gelatinous cubes. Like, there's no reason a level 10 party should be fighting gelatinous cube and not like just wrecking house with it real fast. But bump its AC, bump its hit points, add an extra couple hit die. It's a fun fight. A smothering rug, things that your players are not like anticipating fighting. Like, they're running through, oh, this is an ancient temple, we should be fighting skeletons and ghouls and stuff like that. And you're like, well, no, the furniture's trying to kill you. It's just fun.
I saw Morgan in here. You could also throw cursed items in.
Cursed items, yes. That's always risk versus reward.
Yeah, I have not run a lot of dungeon crawls. They're not my forte, but I'm actually planning it. I had a kind of one I ran through Hack. Mostly it was traps with 2 battles in there, but I broke out the good old Tomb of Horrors and had the party where there were holes in the statues and they'd reach in and find items and stuff like that. So the last one they reached into had a nasty surprise in there. Oh, Sphere of Annihilation. But yeah, I tend to do a fine mix of some nice choice enemies and stuff like that. And for diversity. And speaking of diversity, in terms of building a battle or building an encounter, there's different types of monsters. I'm not just talking fiends and stuff. There are monsters or enemies that are built for more melee, while there are those who have abilities and spells and can do from a range. Do either of you prefer to kind of try to make it diverse as possible with a couple strong melee, or do you do all of one type sometime? That sort of thing.
I tend to, if I'm doing like I do a lot of humanoid encounters I've noticed lately, which I'm trying to like veer away from and do more just different kinds of encounters. But generally I'll do like a couple of melee fighters and then maybe a couple of ranged people, whether it be spellcasters or people with arrows or something like that. And then maybe give the melee fighters some sort of ability that allows them to like a pack tactics or martial advantage that like bugbears and stuff have, that give them advantage if they have foes within 5 feet of whoever they're attacking. Yeah.
I'll run a mix of most things, depending on if it's not like, fighting the Elder Brain. It's just like where it's a kind of a mix of both, or it's because the thing comes down to it, like when you're using like magic users, everyone's waiting for the fireball to go off, and then you've got people waiting on reactions to spend on counterspell, and then that entire caster's turn is wasted. And I think it's one of those things, like, looking at it, I lean towards more abilities than I do spell users. More like, okay, well, a good one was like Yon the Broken, where you guys were fighting like the tentacle monster thing that it was like resistant to all damage, but he was vulnerable to all damage, and like kind of running that line where it's got a symbiotic relationship a little bit, and then you guys fighting those. And then, so you've got the big melee bruiser just slamming you guys around, and just the weak little spellcaster like ping, showing up out invisible, shooting a spell, ping.
I prefer abilities over spells too, but sometimes I'll toss some spells in. Sometimes I'll also have some of my spellcasters have counterspell, because I have people who cast counterspell in my party. So we have another lovely question from Stevie. A bit of diversity that I don't think is used enough is vertical space. Having things, ledges, up on stairs, up on pillars can change a group's normal combat process. Do you guys use height to your advantage?
No.
I'm going to say no too, because that's not something I ever really process, because 99% of the time everyone's on the ground. But to be honest, I think that's a really good idea. I think having a vertical space where to pull in Critical Role, the fight where they got the bow in the Feywild, where I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'm probably going to get corrected.
Something with an S.
Probably. Up on high, and they had to get up there. Having ledges or flying or, monsters that can create pillars that they can use to keep above, forcing people to think differently. Though, to me, you also have to be careful to not make it to the point where no one can get up there or everyone's wasting their turns to get up there. Thank you, Sondor. That's it. You want to make it so it's still attainable for your players, because otherwise they will get frustrated. You're spending all your turns to get up there, and he's teleported away. So, but yeah, I think especially like doing an ambush where they're on ledges or something like that, I think could be really interesting, because the first round of combat they're at a disadvantage. So I would say always try to use, again, the terrain, vertical space to make things a little bit more diverse. Thinking in 3D.
I think the only problem with running the vertical space very well is you run into the math problems, a lot of stuff, because I know my group's not that big of a deal, but it's like, well, if he's 30 feet up and I'm 40 feet away, what's the distance between me and him? Can I shoot da-da-da? And to me, it's like, I'm like, what? Yes. Like, no, like, I'm not, that process is not clicked through my mind. And also it's like, I mean, it runs the line, like, you do want to use flight to, your melee fighters are standing there, like, holding their axe, going, like, it's 30 feet in the air. Shit.
I can't throw my axe, there's lava all over the place.
Exactly. It's like you gotta rethink plan, which is a really cool, which is a good thing, like the Beholder fight, the Elder Brain fight, where we had we had Spork the Orc running with his fighter, like, I can't hit this thing, what am I gonna do? And it made him forced to be like, well, if I look at the battlefield, maybe I can change things through that way, or...
Yeah, I'm always big on making your players think outside of, and I hit it with my axe. Or, I cast this. It's making them think about, well, shit, the normal's not going to work. What can I do here? Like, Charles had us in the Underdark fighting a Beholder and Elder Brain mix, which was absolutely fucking terrifying. By the way, got me thinking of, my character has a broom of flying. She was going to get on her broom, fly to the top, land on the brain, and cast lightning bolt directly down onto it. So making your encounters, for lack of a better term, stimulating to your players, getting them to think, what can I do, is something you always want to aim for. And having encounters balanced where it might force them out of the norm is always interesting. So always look to your player's strength. It's really hard if you're just starting out, but if you've run with a group of people for a little bit, you get, okay, well, this player likes to do this and this and this. What can I do to make sure that they can't do that, or it's not the yeah, it was over at the Overmind, which was absolutely terrifying, by the way, but so much fun, so much fucking fun.
One question I want to ask you guys: unwinnable combat. Setting a fight that unless your players can pull up the greatest comeback or the greatest circumstances fall just in the right line that your players can take down the unbeatable foe. Because I like them. I really do. I think it's a great narrative standpoint to be like, here's this guy, you guys can't win, and you.
I like that in like you said, in a narrative sense, but I don't. I think I would be more okay with it in a sense of like if they stumble upon this person, or if this person is kind of like the way you handled the Archwraith, Charles. It's like we were so under his level that he was just gonna play with us with this these tests in the Shadowfell and make us run around the city that we used to love and all this stuff. I thought that was handled really well. And as far as unwinnable combats, like like the job is they have like a job to go this one place and take on this thing, and that thing is unwinnable. Like having it be a straight line to the unwinnable combat, and then they have to run from it. I don't know how I'd feel about that.
Oh no, that's not.
Yeah.
That's not handling like the unwinnable combat. So it's like, well, going to the Shadowfell and like being like, well, this big bad needs you. You need to collect an item, but this guy's gonna be fucking with you the entire time. And if you guys ever try to like engage in direct combat, that's the issue. Like trying to making players think outside of I'm gonna hit it with an axe.
I'm bringing up Critical Role again. I mean, like when the Chroma Conclave first attacked Demon, like the Umbersill. Or was it Umbersill? Whoever first attacked them, and they all took like that shit ton of damage, and literally all of them just stopped and looked at each other like, fuck. And
20 misses. What?
20 misses. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And just like that is a terrifying, awesome moment. And so I don't think that unwinnable comments. I think in the right circumstance they're awesome, but I think it's also one of those things that's easy to cross the line to annoying your players and making it feel like not fair. So I think it's a deft hand must be used.
Yeah, I agree completely. I would never lead a direct line to an unwinnable combat. I have played in a game where that was the thing. Everything led up to a fight could not win, and agency being taken away is not fun. It's frustrating as fuck. It's at that point that I think almost the trust between DM and player is broken, because it's like, well, I don't know, but I think letting your players know, not outright, but through narrative and hints of this is not a fight they could possibly win, does put them on, okay, well, we can't fight this. What are we going to do? And that's totally cool. And I think it's totally awesome. But I am always wary about dropping them into a fight they can't win and then watching them be stubborn and not wanting to stop. Because it's like, hi, I love you guys. You're not going to win. You're not going to win. Please don't. Okay, no, you want to. Okay, this is not fine. No, this is, guys, no, please. So it's in the deft hands, it can be an amazing, epic story moment. But it's something you have to handle with care. But yeah, I think I'm with Charles on this. This can be really good, but again, let your players know ahead of time. That way, no one's upset, and sort of drop narrative hints.
You know, I didn't even realize that. I mean, it does make sense that you said that you like these, Charles, because there was another one that we encountered when Portsmouth first fell.
Oh yeah,
with Collect, the Prince of Sorrows, one of the most powerful assassin rogues. Came up to us and was like, you guys have to run. You can't win. Portsmouth is down. You gotta leave. And it was like one of those moments where everybody was like, we gotta go. But I was just like, we can't go. We have to fight. We always have to fight, and we have to save the city. But in the end, it's just like, yeah. I mean, and like, that's a great way of doing it too, is instead of being like DM over the table, like, you guys can't win this fight, doing it with an NPC that in his own right is powerful, or someone that the party trusts. That's a great way of being like telling them that you can't win this fight.
Blint,
yeah.
Blint was telling us no and running was when it finally like, no, we can't do this. So yeah, that as long as there's as always, communication between DM and player is paramount.
I think it's like running that line with because the unwinnable combat's like one of those great things to talk about, but not all combat ends in death. It's not your players get knocked unconscious and boom, you're taken into you're captured and stuff like that. I know it's one of those things like running the line with like player agency and stuff like that, which I mean, no player is never wants to retreat. That is the last thing on their mind. Especially a lot of us new school player, a lot of guys who just, who started playing because of Critical Role or, all this stuff, that old school mentality of like, well, shit, we didn't check this door properly, we're all gonna die, let's fucking just bug out for the next couple hours, they're not built into us. We're immediately like, well, we're the good guys, we have to win. And the idea of like, why didn't we win? We should run.
I think that's a good point of just modern storytelling, too. I mean, how many shows have you seen that have gone on for too long? Supernatural! Because the characters can't die.
I'm with Charles on that. It's also knowing your players and then finding a way to approach them in game to get it through their heads that this is not a winnable battle. Though sometimes DMs are secretly really good at dissuading their players into doing something. I'm sorry, Charles Portsmouth, the first time. Charles scared the shit out of us. Charles scared the shit out of us with one battle. We're all like, maybe we shouldn't be here, so we turned around and we left. And that's like, there was no unwinnable battle. It was just, maybe we're not, maybe this is a bad idea. So it can be done. It's just, again, personally, I think you have to be careful. But if you have trust and communication, I think, as long as your players know going in.
Sorry, I'm flirting with Herm in chat.
Hi, Herm.
Well, of course.
So Angel Sin said, I'd love to play with time in an encounter, whether it's time jumps over long periods, time speeding up, or even reversing. Have you guys done anything interesting with time in your encounters? Not with the reversing time. The only time I've ever done that was I had an enemy that could reverse, essentially turn back time and make somebody roll their attack again. I'm sorry, Charles. But I that's something you have to have, to me, a delicate hand for, because you can really piss your players off if you're constantly doing that. But I mean, other than slow and haste, it's one of those things where I'm really not sure how to handle that.
I think that there was the possibility for one of that in one of my encounters. Not because really playing with time in the middle of an encounter, you run going back is the issue. Going forward, it's like, oh, you step through like the chase scene through the portals, and you're like running through like the dystopian future and all that. So that's a cool idea. It's really nifty. But like running it for like just a standard combat, like I had the running with the Crystal Alliance, the same combat where there was 2 crystals set up. One was going to advance combat by 2 rounds, and everything was going to be drastically changed within the room, and like the crystals would have been set off and shit would have been going wild. But there was one that was to reset combat by 2 rounds, so hit points would return to normal, all the spell slots you extend would be gone, but it's same for the bad guys too. So kind of running that line, I mean, that's about as close as I've gotten. Now I'm thinking about it, I really, really want to do like a cool chase scene through like portals in time, because that just reminds me like the fucking Witcher, like looking for Ciri.
That was such an awesome sequence of events.
Now that's what I want to do in D&D now. So I'm going to go write that later.
Oh, God. I'm trying to think of other things that we could talk about as far as encounters. I mean, like, we've talked a lot about combat encounters, and we talked a little bit about like ability check encounters, that kind of thing. What about role-playing encounters? I've never like done any myself. Like, yeah, social encounters. I don't think I've ever done one other than like a PC is like trying to figure out if someone's lying, but that was only like one check rather than a series of checks.
Well, I think that's a different set. That's not something you balance, to be honest.
I guess that's fair.
The social encounters are one of those things. Like I'm not good at them. I'm the combat guy. I'm the guy that's like, okay, cool, we can set up this really cool dynamic combat. But I'm the guy that's like, you want to talk to your parents?
I think you did a really good job.
You do a lot better than you think you did, Charles.
I don't. I think I did terrible. It's one of those things I'm awful with. It's also the fact is that every NPC has this voice.
What, a sexy voice?
I know, right? How to time encounters. Like, how many per game? To me, it really, really depends. Honestly, I've only really been able to fit 1 encounter per game, sometimes 2. But it depends on how long you're going to run. A lot of people try to force 3, 4, 5 encounters in like a single 4-hour game, and you can't do that. I don't think. It's one of those things where you have to factor in that people are No matter what you're doing, even if it's just getting them to a fight to fight and then back, they will want to role play. They will want to go off the rails. They will want to do 500,000 different things. So you have to factor that in. They want to shit post all the time, and their DM is amazing and wonderful and patient. But I go one small encounter, one big encounter. But that's just me. And that's what I find I have time for. Again, as always, with everything I say, your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I think depending on what type of game you're running. I mean, I've had chances to run like 2, 3 like decent chunk encounters, but that's like 90% of the game right there. In a 4 or 5 hour session, I think the first Underdark thing we ran like 8 hours. We had 3 big encounters, and like the super jelly, the Blunderdark sharks.
Oh my god, the flicking Blunderdark shark.
Dana, Dana.
You ever want to get rid of your player's portable boat or their folding boat? Just send them to the Underdark and have Jaws attack them, destroy their boat.
Not Bodie McBoatface!
And you didn't want to get on my broom, sir.
I did in the end, though.
I mean, that's kind of like one of those things. Like I like heavy encounter episodes. Like sessions are fine. Again, it runs on the line of like don't make them the same encounter over and over again. Don't like, well, you fought orcs in this room, but now you're gonna fight goblins in this room. It's like they're the same thing reflavored, but it's like you have a cool like skill check encounter with like trying to row your little rowboat faster to get away from the sharks and take some damage doing that. Doing like an investigation kind of thing, and like having oozes drop down or throwing Umber Hulks at them in the same exact fight, and it's a lot of fun running, like trying to make that feel like it's plausible, but it's still dynamic, and you still feel like you're not just like walking from the old school adage like I'm gonna walk down the hallway, I'm gonna kick in this door, fight this thing, turn around, kick in that door, fight this thing, rest for 10 minutes, rinse and repeat.
Agreed. I love the idea of mixing in skill encounters into the mix because it breaks up the monotony of, and we're fighting again. It's, okay, so you guys finished fighting and now you're having to roll dex saves or roll strength saves or the dreaded roll con save.
I'm pretty good at those.
Some of us aren't so blessed, Charles. So it's always thinking outside of the box and what would be interesting, because 9 times out of 10, if you think it's a really fucking cool idea, your players probably will too, because I like to think of, this would be so... I also think in terms of, would this be fun to just, like, experience? Then, yeah, well, not always experience, because fuck the Blender Shark. That was terrifying.
Christina says, how does environment affect your combat stuff, and which plane, Shadowfell, Feywild, etc. do you prefer running encounters in? One fight that comes to mind where terrain affected it was the finale fight of my tethered multi-shot, where they were fighting this like badass vampire called a Bruxa, which is from the Witcher series, and it's part of a homebrew that Snicket gave to me, and it's amazing. And I think there was the Bruxa and also this like charmed rogue figure, and they were in like a big server room underneath the city, and there were these walkways and kind of like a series of walkways that you could get to the other side of this small chasm. Chasm. Whichever way you prefer saying it, the correct or incorrect way.
We'll let you decide.
Yeah, exactly. But it wasn't like a huge drop. It was only I think it was only 10 feet. So one of the things that the rogue would do is he would use his stealthiness to hop down into this 10-foot drop, sneak up onto the party, hop up, and then get behind them and do some damage to the back of them. No, you are all such freaking sarcastic bastards in the chat right now. And yeah, so that was one that I can recall off the top of my head that I thought was pretty interesting and made the fight a little more dynamic.
I think here the fight that promptly comes to mind is where I killed Snicket.
Motherfucker.
Well, you gotta think like that's where terrain really played a huge aspect of the fact is because like so the fight in question is like the big like was like the big finale fight of like one of the arcs during the original like off the rails crew fight when we were streaming this game and everything like that, where they faced off against my homebrewed Beholder, which was a lot of fun. And like lava played a huge effect like this, like as the terrain like the terrain shifted in like the lava would ebb and flow and like come up over parts of the field, so people who were stuck like in that would take damage, and like there was like chasms that opened up during the combat which set up like 10-foot gaps, which is just how Rhea died. She got pulled into one of these.
That was Janora setting off a trap where the chasm opened up and filled with lava. So.
Because she thought it was going to do something good instead of something horribly terrible.
It wasn't terrible.
Hey, I got a cool white streak out of it, and Rhea got her kiss, so she's happy.
Yeah, I mean that's where like the most prominent thing with like environments kind of come through. I mean then it runs like runs the same line of like I love the Shadowfell. It's something that I kind of didn't think I was gonna like, but I really like the idea because that's what they've been in for the last 2 weeks, and that's what mine in my Tuesday game is the shadow like the veil between the Shadowfell and like the real world, and it's this really cool idea of like teleportation magic could fucking backfire. That's really fun for me. The fact that if they drop the 0 hit points, they couldn't come back up.
Oh yeah, I guess I didn't answer the question. I haven't actually run a game in any other plane other than the material plane, so I guess my favorite that I've played in. I like the material plane, but I think my favorite that I've been to. I kind of want to say the fire plane, even though I hated it at the time, but it was really fun and kind of a cool landscape and kind of terrifying.
Welcome to my reflavoring of Ragnaros and
Fatbucks tells you what my favorite plane is.
Feywild.
Rhea hates the Feywild, which is something everyone always was like, oh well, she hated it. Now it's home. It's a bit different. But I actually, I love the Feywild, but to be quite honest, I love the Shadowfell, because there's so much fun shit in the Shadowfell. Not to mention there's the lovely tables you can roll on for added bonus, which Mike's character Uthal got, like, in spades. He got 2. Dustin! Hi, Dustin.
Sup, Dustin? Yeah, which for those who, because our game is like a home style game, we'll just know that Mike's in for a fun ride because he forgot about his disadvantage on all saving throws during the skill check to escape the Shadowfell, like creating a singularity and exploding out. He forgot he had disadvantage on all saves, so we're gonna have some cool Shadowfell curse affect him because of that.
Yeah, so I'm scared. Planes are interesting. I've not really done anything with the planes yet. I mean, they've had glimpses into it where they fought the Shadow Dragon in my Wednesday game. For Science Crew is stuck in a demi-plane at the moment. They'll see exactly what's going on soon. I'm not saying much more because hi Christina, hi Brian. So yeah. I don't know if we want to wrap this up because I know Charles has a game to go to.
I do have to go. Marky is going to try to kill me tonight, so.
Yay! Not yay!
So, we will definitely, if Charles is met, we'll do this again sometime and take some more questions. Because there's so much you can talk about in counterbalancing and stuff like that. So, probably another part to this wonderful thing of maybe talking more about different kinds of encounters and more skill-based ideas and stuff like that. So
I had lots of fun talking with my friends today.
I also had fun. So big thanks to Charles. His Twitter handle is @BeardedViking13. If you don't follow him, what the fuck's the matter with you? You should go do that. Charles is fucking amazing.
It's just a bunch of Mass Effect right now. You're not missing much.
And and cute puppies, and also glorious beard. So, so with that, I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you everyone for watching and for asking questions. We'll be doing more things like that in the future, so keep an eye out. So I'm Snicket at Persnicketies on Twitter.
My name is Chris at IRChris, IARECHRIS on Twitter.
And I'm Charles at BeardedViking13.
And thank you all so much for watching, and remember, keep rolling.
May all your rolls be nat 20s. So we will see you next time in the
Something
dungeon.
catchy and interesting.
Exactly.
That was perfect.
Bye,
Cut it now.